During the Gilded Age, Hartford, Connecticut was said to be the wealthiest city in the nation based on per capita income. From the end of the 18th century to the start of the 20th century, many grand homes were built here, showcasing various architectural styles and elaborate decorative ornamentation. Among them was the famous residence of Mark Twain, which survives today as a museum. Unfortunately, as in too many other American cities, most of these landmark edifices were later demolished. Hi, this is History with me, Dan Sterner. In this video, we'll explore 15 of the greatest lost mansions of Old Hartford, and a few other lost houses along the way as well. They were all built between 1798 and the 1870s. At the start of the 19th century, many of the city's wealthiest residents erected gracious Federal-style homes along Prospect Street, which was conveniently located between bustling Main Street and the busy wharves along the Connecticut River, the source of so much of Hartford's wealth at the time. Prominently situated at the corner of Prospect and Arch Streets was our first mansion. It was most likely erected in about 1800 by Henry Hudson, who owned paper mills in East Hartford and was a partner in the printing firm of Hudson and Goodwin, publishers of the Connecticut Current newspaper. The house had a two-story Federal-style portico on its south end that featured a Palladian window set in a temple-style triangular pediment supported by 6 slender classical columns. A later owner, reflecting changing architectural tastes, added a mansard-roofed wing in the 1870s. The house was torn down in about 1910 to make way for the eastern end of Hartford's new City Hall. Hudson's neighbors included some of the city's leading merchant businessmen. Around the corner on Grove Street was a gambrel-roofed residence built in about 1780. It was planned to be the home of merchant and Revolutionary War diplomat Silas Deane, but he never set foot in it, and it became instead the home of his brother Barnabas. It was demolished in 1926 for a parking lot. Just north of Hudson's House was our second mansion, built in the 1790s. It was also erected in the Federal style and featured slender classical columns, in this case fronting a 2-story side wing that extended from the north side of the house. This house was built by the wealthy merchant Jeremiah Wadsworth for his daughter Catherine and her husband General Nathaniel Terry. And just next door was our third mansion, a house built in a similar style in 1798, for Jeremiah's son Daniel Wadsworth. Daniel inherited his father's wealth and was a patron of the arts. He established the Wadsworth Athenaeum Museum of Art, which opened on Main Street in 1844 just west of his house on Prospect Street, on the site where his father Jeremiah's house had stood. That fine residence was moved to another street, where it was eventually torn down in 1887. As for the Daniel Wadsworth House, it was altered a number of times over the decades. In 1881, it became home to the Hartford Club, and later it was substantially remodeled to become an annex to the Wadsworth Athenaeum. The house was torn down in 1932 and replaced with the Avery Memorial addition to the Athenaeum. The neighboring Terry House had already been taken down nearly a quarter century earlier to make way for an extension to the museum's Morgan Memorial Building. In the second quarter of the 19th century, the Federal style gave way in popularity to the Greek Revival style. For instance, a row of Greek Revival houses once stood along the east side of Main Street, south of Charter Oak Avenue. 3 of these houses had 2-story front porticos modeled on Greek temples with 4 large Doric columns supporting a triangular pediment. We are fortunate that one house from this row, the Ellery Hills House, which has a non-typical rounded pediment, survives today. Perhaps the grandest Greek Revival house in the city is mansion number 4 on our list, the Leverett Brainard House on Washington Street, which had an even more elaborate pediment supported by 6 massive columns. Built for a member of the Kipp family, The house's most famous resident was Leverett Brainard, a partner in the Hartford publishing firm of Case, Lockwood, and Brainard. He served as mayor of Hartford and was married to the sister of Connecticut Governor Morgan G. Bulkeley. Leverett's son, Morgan Bulkeley Brainard, lived in a house just north of his father's. Its architectural style was transitional, having features of the Greek Revival, like its front portico with Ionic columns, and the Italianate style with its bracketed rooftop cornice. Both of these houses were demolished in the 1920s to make way for the new Hartford County Courthouse building. Let's continue to stick with Washington Street for the next group of mansions on our list. In the mid-19th century, Washington was Hartford's most fashionable street, lined with the grand homes of some of its most prominent citizens. Some of them reflected the popularity at the time of the Romantic Revival styles of Gothic and Italianate. Mansions 5, 6, 7, and 8 on our list were lined up along the south side of the street, opposite the Brainard House. Starting with the Gothic towers and battlements of a house built in 1841 for Elijah and Edmund Kellogg, whose lithograph company once rivaled Currier and Ives. The house was designed by New Haven architect Henry Austin to resemble an English Tudor castle, but instead of stone it was built of brick covered with wood. It was later owned by Pliny Jewell, founder of the Jewell Belting Company. Next south was another Austin-designed residence, an Italianate-style house erected for Henry Z. Platt in 1847. Its front facade was dominated by a flamboyant two-story portico. Its intricate carving was among architect Austin's best work. Next door was another house that combined Greek Revival and Italianate-style elements. It was the home of Connecticut's legendary governor, Morgan Gardner Bulkeley, and was later significantly expanded. Next door to that house was the Greek Revival home of the governor's brother, the merchant William H. Bulkeley. While it's sad that all these houses are now lost, we can be grateful that a residence just south of them, the Italianate-style Lucius Barber House, is still standing. I could mention many other lost houses further south on Washington Street, but for our next two mansions, let's move to the northwest, out Farmington Avenue. As downtown Hartford became more built up, many affluent citizens began to move westwards, erecting homes in the Asylum Hill and West End neighborhoods. The area where the Aetna Insurance Company erected its massive home office building in the early 1930s was once the neighborhood of some of the city's most prominent residents. One of these was Francis B. Cooley, who had become a successful dry goods merchant in Chicago before he retired and moved to Hartford in 1864. In his new home city, he held a number of prominent positions, including serving as president of Society for Savings. He initially lived on Prospect Street before making the move westwards, purchasing an older house on Farmington Avenue, which he dramatically remodeled in 1868. It was said that the men who did the work were paid by the wealthy Mr. Cooley in gold at the end of each day. This redesign reflected the contemporary popularity of the French Second Empire style, with a mansard roof and a grand chateauesque tower. This home, the ninth mansion on our list, was torn down in 1931 to make way for the Aetna building. There were many other grand homes along Farmington Avenue, but I'll mention just one, our 10th mansion, which stood at the northwest corner of Farmington Avenue and Marshall Street. An imposing Italian villa-style house, it featured a side porch with an elaborately domed roof. Built for the Niles family, it was later the home of Pliny Jewell's son, Marshall Jewell, who lived here during his tenure as governor of Connecticut. The Jewell House was torn down around 1936. By the way, if you are liking this video so far, remember to hit the subscribe button. Further down Farmington Avenue is the Mark Twain House, built for the famous humorist in 1874. It was part of a neighborhood known as Nook Farm, where some of Hartford's prominent intellectuals of the Gilded Age era lived, including Harriet Beecher Stowe, her half-sister, the suffragist leader Isabella Beecher Hooker, and abolitionist Senator Frances Gillette, who was the father of actor William Gillette. Many of the historic homes in this community on the north side of Forest Street were demolished when the new Hartford Public High School building was erected here in the 1960s. The 11th mansion on our list was one of these, and it was notable as an architectural and literary landmark. It was built the year before the Mark Twain House and was designed by the same architect, Edward Tuckerman Potter, in a similar high Victorian Gothic style with decorative brickwork. Erected for Charles H. Warner, in 1884 it became the residence of his brother, Charles Dudley Warner, a writer and editor of the Hartford Courant newspaper, who co-wrote the novel The Gilded Age with Mark Twain. If it had survived, the house would have been another landmark of the history of the Nook Farm community. Another house with literary connections is the 12th on our list. While the Harriet Beecher Stowe House survives today on Forest Street, this was not the famous author and abolitionist's only residence in the city. Stowe moved to Hartford about a decade after she wrote the influential novel Uncle Tom's Cabin. She had spent time in the city in her youth, and two of her sisters already lived in Nook Farm. In about 1864, near the Park River, she erected a large Gothic Revival-style mansion called Oakholm, designed by Hartford architect Octavius Jordan. This grandiose structure, which included an attached chapel on its eastern side, proved too expensive for Stowe to maintain, and it is also said to have been shoddily constructed, which is why she soon moved to the more modest house on Forest Street in 1873, which is where she lived until her death in 1896. Oakholm was soon surrounded by factories and became a storehouse for the Hartford Cycle Works. It was torn down in 1905, only 40 years after it was built. Moving north, Asylum Avenue was also once lined with fine residences. One of these, set well back from the avenue at the corner of Atwood Street, is our 13th mansion, an Italianate villa built in 1854 for the dry goods merchant Erastus Collins. It was later the home of his son, Atwood Collins, who became president of the Security Trust Company. The house, which had a decoratively carved front porch, was demolished in 1940 to make way for the headquarters of the National Fire Insurance Company, a building which is now part of St. Francis Hospital. Just to the north, on Collins Street, was a substantial building that looked like a grand mansion, but was actually built in 1874 to house the Chinese Education Mission, a program sponsored by the Chinese government, which brought students from China to New England to receive a Western-style education. Later used as St. Thomas Seminary and as a residence for nurses at St. Francis Hospital, it was demolished in 1967. Just to the west, along Woodland Street, was our 14th mansion. Resembling a castle, it was the home of Reverend Francis Goodwin, an Episcopal rector and wealthy philanthropist. Reverend Goodwin was the cousin of financier J.P. Morgan. He played a major role in the development of Hartford's park system and was also an amateur architect, designing his own mansion, which was built in 1868. But this did not end his architectural pursuits. He convinced his father, the businessman Major James Goodwin, to let him design a mansion for him as well, an even more massive granite building that became the grandest residence in the city and is the last mansion on our list. It was erected in 1871 at the corner of Asylum Avenue and Woodland Street. Today, this is the site of the classical magnet school, but for 70 years the house known as the Goodwin Castle dominated the corner. Its massive main tower had a tall pyramidal roof. The front doorway, with its Gothic pointed arch, resembled the entrance to a medieval cathedral. On the south end was a large conservatory, and on the north end was an attached carriage house whose architecture matched that of the main residence. The mansion sat on substantial grounds that extended to the banks of the Park River. Today we lament the passing of this mansion, which was torn down in 1940, but we are lucky that the interior furnishings and decoration of one of the Goodwin reception rooms survives on display today at the Wadsworth Athenaeum. So let me know in the comments which was your favorite of these 15 mansions. Are there others that you would have included on this list? As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of my videos.